Hi everyone, my name is Oliver from the University of Toronto, and this is Heteroscedastic Uncertainty for Robust Generative Latent Dynamics, presented virtually for IROS 2020. This paper is about learning or identifying image-based latent dynamics for control. Learning or identifying dynamics from a sequence of high-dimensional images is a difficult challenge in many domains, including reinforcement learning and control. In many cases, the task-relevant state must be extracted from an image, and hand-engineered models may fail to properly represent the state or capture the dynamics. In the latent dynamics framework, high-dimensional observations are embedded into a lower-dimensional space in which the dynamics can be learned. If we want to safely use latent dynamics models in real-world scenarios, they must be robust to the potentially detrimental effects of corrupted out-of-distribution data unseen during training. Naively directly encoding an image can lead to embeddings outside the training data manifold, where the dynamics are not known. In this work, we investigate the composition of an existing classical filtering framework, novelty detection, and a latent dynamics model as a potential way to address these shortcomings. By treating the embeddings as measurements, we are able to gate or filter out bad measurements. We do this by modifying the uncertainty on a per-observation basis or in a heteroscedastic manner. Specifically, we compose a linear Gaussian state space model, or Kalman filter, within the latent dynamics. Given a sequence of images and control inputs, we use a variational autoencoder, or VAE, to compress each image into a lower dimensional latent measurement, represented as a Gaussian distribution. Given an arbitrary high uncertainty initial latent state distribution Z1, the control inputs U, and the compressed latent measurements Y, we train a GRU network to output locally linear state space matrices A, B, and C based on a history of past latent states and control inputs. We can then propagate the latent state distribution Z forward in a differentiable manner, using the standard Kalman filtering or smoothing equations based on the measurement and transition uncertainties R and Q. In order to train our model, we maximize the evidence lower bound as commonly done in variational inference. Specifically, we take a sample of Y in yellow, which we decode into the parameters of the reconstruction likelihood in green. We also enforce the structure of the dynamics by using a KL divergence term with a prior in purple based on the generative distribution of the latent measurements from the Kalman filter. We can calculate this distribution analytically in closed form for Gaussian distributions. Importantly, having composed a Kalman filter structure, we can now regulate the measurement uncertainties R to filter out or gate unwanted measurements. In order to decide when to inflate the measurement uncertainty to account for novel or out-of-distribution data, we use the reconstruction loss as a proxy. The reconstruction loss is a useful heuristic because it is generally higher for data not seen during training. For our model, we can reuse the already available variational encoder and decoder used to compress the images. Based on this reconstruction loss, we can inflate the measurement uncertainties accordingly, leading to a per-image heteroscedastic uncertainty. We first evaluated our approach on a modified commonly used pendulum task. We treat the pendulum's angular position and velocity as privileged information for evaluation and benchmarking solely, and train our model using images only. We can plot the learned latent space manifold and color-code it based on the ground truth angular position and velocity as a sanity check. On the left, we have the latent space color-coded with the angular position, and on the right, with the angular velocity. We can qualitatively see that the space seems structured and smooth. We also tested the predictive capability of our model when given a sequence of initial images where synthetic noise and obstructions were added to some of the images. As a first step, we embed the images as compressed measurements. From these measurements and our Kalman filter, we can then infer our initial state. Afterwards, using our GRU network trained to output the locally linear state transition matrices, we can predict future states. We can decode the future predicted states into images that we can compare to the ground truth. From top to bottom, we have predicted images from the ground truth, our method in light red, and from the equivalent of a naive direct encoding in blue. In the red box, we have the initial images used, and to the right, we have the future predicted and decoded images. We can qualitatively see that our method is better able to predict future states. We can also plot the predicted states and visually compare their quality against the reference predictions made with no corrupted images on the left, which we use as ground truth. The results from our approach in the center, using heteroscedastic uncertainty, can mitigate the effects of corrupted initial images and better predict future states when compared to the direct encoding approach to the right. We also evaluated our approach on a real-world visual reaching task. We chose a visual task which allowed us to easily measure the ground truth performance of the underlying system. In this case, we use an existing reinforcement learning benchmark task from recent work, but deny access to the manipulator's encoders and only use the images from the camera. We solely make use of the joint angles for ground truth in order to benchmark and evaluate our experiments. As previously done with the simulated pendulum, we can decode future predicted states into images to qualitatively evaluate the predicted capability of our model. The results are very similar to the previous pendulum environment, and our model is better able to predict future states in the presence of corrupted images. We use a model predictive controller with the learned lane dynamics for an image-based control experiment. We demonstrate that our model is able to more accurately track a given goal image in the presence of dark rectangular synthetic obstructions unseen during training. In the first video, we have the equivalent of a standard latent dynamics model with no notion of heteroscedastic uncertainty. We can observe that the introduction of obstructions causes the system to behave erratically and to poorly track the goal image. On the other hand, in the second video, we have the latent dynamics model with a notion of heteroscedastic uncertainty. In this case, we can observe that the model is able to successfully ignore the corrupted images and track the goal image. Finally, we repeat this control experiment with 6 different combinations of starting configurations and goal images, each associated with a figure on this slide. In order to benchmark our image-based control task, we use the ground truth manipulator's joint positions and measure the tracking costs throughout the whole trajectory. However, our latent dynamics model only has access to images. In each figure, we vary the amount of obstructions n and the duration of each obstruction d in terms of time steps. The use of synthetic degradations allowed us to fairly perform an ablation study by comparing the performance of both models under near identical conditions. In all cases, our model achieved a significantly lower tracking cost by being more robust to occlusions. In conclusion, we have introduced a robust generative latent dynamics model capable of accurately predicting future states under difficult input degradations that ideally should not affect the underlying dynamical system. We presented preliminary results from experiments on 2 image-based tasks, a simulated visual pendulum task and a real-world manipulator visual reaching task. Our approach is a contribution towards enabling the deployment of learned latent dynamics models in real-world safety-critical applications such as robotics. In this initial work, we simply chose to weigh our measurement uncertainties using a reconstruction-based loss as a proxy for novelty to detect out-of-distribution data not seen during training. However, this approach is conservative, and images that are not well reconstructed may still be useful. An interesting avenue for future research would be to combine novelty detection with self-supervised uncertainty learning. Thank you for watching this presentation. To learn more about this work, please consult our paper in Robotics and Automation Letters. Our source code is available on GitHub. Feel free to contact me with any questions about this work at the email shown here.